Jazzcast Pros.
Today, I have on a very special guest. Her name is Dana K. White. She is the author of Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. He Cares About Your Heart. And she's also the host of A Slob Comes Clean podcast. She is going to share with us how to debunk some myths and misconceptions surrounding decluttering and religion. So I hope that you are looking forward to this episode as much as I am. Dana, thank you so much for coming to the show today. I'm so excited.
Thanks for having me on, Derria.
Welcome to the Declutter Empress Radio Podcast, a podcast to help you create a functional space wherever you roam. I am your host, Derria, and today we will discuss how to make your home your oasis. So your approach to decluttering is all about being free of guilt. And I thought it was so refreshing and so practical because people often have misconceptions when it comes to cleanliness is next to godliness. And I think that is something that is definitely a myth, and it can make people feel shamed and guilty. What are some of the ways that you think that we can debunk that myth right now, especially when there's a person out there who is thinking, I don't want to get rid of everything in my house, but I also feel so overwhelmed right now?
I mean, the reality is that shame is not motivating, right? Like, it is not a strategy to feel bad about your space. And when you add on this cleanliness is next to godliness idea, which is not in the Bible, right? Like, it's not actually in there. And most people know that, but also will say, but isn't the idea there? So like in this book, I'm just trying to really dig in and go, no, it's not there. And here's why, right? But I think it's really important to let go of that shame, because for me personally, getting out from under that shame and guilt is actually the thing that allowed me to move forward in my home, right? Mm-hmm. Because I used to think that the answer to my clutter issues, to my home being a total disaster, was to be a completely different person than who I was. Like, that's what I thought. Like, I thought, okay, there is something wrong with me. And if I could just be different, I could do this thing. Yeah. And in reality, what actually changed things for me was realizing and accepting that my brain is not defective. You know what I mean? Like this is a natural challenge for me. I do not come at this from the perspective of somebody who is naturally organized. In fact, I had to dig my way out of my own mess, right? And so that's how I developed my strategies. And as I did that, I was actually writing about it online, was not teaching anybody anything. It was just like a way to stay focused in the beginning. People would say, these are my thoughts. This is exactly how this is what, my struggles. This is how it goes in my house too. And I had thought I was the only one, and realizing there were other people who struggled the way that I did, seeing that those were generally highly creative people.
Yes.
Like, creativity is the common thread among people who struggle with clutter, right? Not everybody who struggles with clutter, not everybody who's creative struggles with clutter, but most people who struggle with clutter are highly creative, right? Like, that is the common thread. And seeing that helped me accept that, okay, I'm glad I'm creative.
Right.
It's directly related to this thing that I really don't love about myself, this inability to keep my house under control. But if I'm going to be thankful for being creative and it's related, then it makes me maybe not excited to have this struggle, but more accepting of the struggle, right? Like, taking the shame away and saying, especially as a Christian, I'm like, God created my brain this way. Like, this was not a mistake. This was not like, oops, I forgot to, the old, thing of, I think I missed the line where they were handing out housekeeping skills or whatever, like that feeling. Taking away that shame actually gave me permission to figure out what worked for me and to not feel like a failure because traditional organizing advice didn't work for me, because the people who write traditional organizing advice have different brain types than me, right? Like their brains work
Yes.
differently. So I don't need to feel like a failure. I just have to figure out what does work for me. And that, I would say 9 out of 10 emails that I get from women who are finally making progress say that their turning point was realizing they weren't alone, was realizing they weren't broken. Like, oh, because this is something we hide, right? Like you can just not let people come in your
Yes.
house and they don't know that this is a struggle. And so you don't know who else is out there struggling this way. And so taking away that shame is just really, really powerful.
I love that because when you talk about the creative brain, because I mean, I go have like thousands of ideas that come day to day at me. And I'm like, okay, who opened up that cabinet over there? Well, did I have that open? And my brain is going in different directions. And so then there is shame there because like you say, we didn't come with an instruction booklet on how to organize. Even though I am a person who stresses that I am a naturally organized person, I was kind of born with it, but everyone is not that way.
Right.
Everyone is not that way. And I think there is that overwhelming shame, as you say, like in the Bible, there's nothing that says cleanliness is next to godliness. It's like when something is repeated 1,000 times, you begin to believe it, and then no one goes to research, where did that thought come from? Who says that something is wrong with me because I don't have all of my books lined up on a shelf or
color coded or
yes.
I also think like, I think that, you know, I'm a mom, right? So I understand how hard it is to motivate your kids sometimes. And so I totally understand how that phrase comes out of your mouth out of a desire to get them to clean up, because getting your kids to clean up is one of the biggest challenges of motherhood, right? And so I get it, but that's why I needed to write 60,000 words to like dive in and let's like really talk about this. Let's don't just go, oh, it's not true, because the reality is like saying that feels like you're being helpful and encouraging someone to clean up. But for the person who really is struggling, it was never that I needed to be motivated to clean. I just literally didn't know what to do. I mean, I thought I was doing what other people were doing. I thought, because I was constantly working on my house. It was not a result of me just letting it go and not worrying about it. I was working on it all the time, more than it seemed like my friends were. And yet I had nothing to show for it. Right. So actual strategies are helpful. Little sayings meant to encourage that actually end up backfiring because they add on spiritual guilt, not helpful.
And see, and I like how you, when you had mentioned like about the courses, like I was looking on your website and I saw the courses that you have, like a lot of times, even something written down, what works for one person may not necessarily work for another. And as you said, you were a work in progress. It wasn't just like you let things go, but you're constantly working on this project and you're like, wait a minute. I know that when I come through my doors, I know that this is supposed to go. My keys are supposed to be hung up here. I'm supposed to hang up my clothes there, but there are no rules.
Right. And I walk through my door and I have no awareness that my keys are leaving my hand or that my coat is leaving my hand. And like, it doesn't cross my mind that has happened until I look around and I'm like, my house is a disaster, right? Like I always tell people, I'm like, one of the things that is the least helpful that people will say to somebody who struggles with clutter is you need to get your house decluttered so you'll be able to concentrate, right? Because that is true for a lot of people. They have to deal with the clutter so they can concentrate. The actual issue for a lot of us who struggle with clutter is that we can concentrate in the midst of the clutter. And that's actually the problem, right?
Yes.
Is that I'm able to zero in on a task and not realize that the mess is just growing, because I can see perfectly clean and I can see horrifically messy where I'm overwhelmed, but I don't see what's happening in between. I don't see the incremental mess, right? And so, you know, that feeling understood, like, okay, you understand where I'm coming from, is so incredibly powerful.
That part right there when you were saying how I've got to get this done first. I got to have my house decluttered first before I can work on this. Because I would have those thoughts every now and then. And it's like, oh, I got to make sure that I put that away, I put this away, or that my entire kitchen cabinet has to be organized before I sit down and write, before I sit down and log in and get that project done. I got to get this done first, but I noticed that it serves as a distraction.
Yeah. And it can be either way, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, doesn't even cross my mind to deal with the stuff before I sit down and work on the project. But at the same time, then I look up and it's out of control and I shut down. And then I am stuck at that point, right? Like, I'm like, now I can't do anything. I'm just paralyzed from being able to do anything because it's so overwhelming to me at this point.
And so, like, if a person has dishes piled up in the sink, before they know it, they've got dishes piled up, the kids' toys are scattered everywhere. What does that indicate? What is it about that situation? Why does it come how does it happen so fast that everything just starts to?
I'm going to tell you a little story. So I love Oprah. Okay. Like I watched literally every Oprah. I mean, like, did you ever listen to that podcast? There's a podcast. It's been years now, but it like went through it and they would name off all these episodes. And I was like, yep, saw it. Yep, saw it. So I love her, right? But I will tell you, there was this one episode and I was a young mom. Okay. And they were talking to somebody whose house was completely out of control, right? Like just completely out of control. And the kitchen, like they showed this picture of the kitchen counter and it was just completely covered in dirty dishes. Mm-hmm. And the person said something like, well, that's just, that was on Monday morning after a busy weekend. I hadn't done dishes that weekend. And Oprah said, it can't get that bad in one weekend. And I was like, Oprah, honey, let me just tell you, it can get that bad in one weekend, right? Like, I don't know how, but it does, right? So I do that for a fact. Anyway, so that was always one of my things where I was like, I think maybe you have people who take care of that for you, right?
Right. Exactly. Weekly, daily, all of us don't have that.
I know. But I love her, right? Of course I love her. Anyway,
I love her.
But the reality is like, how does it get that way? That was constantly my issue, right? Was wondering, how does this keep happening?
Yes.
When I started, I started an anonymous blog. Like I was desperate to be a writer. My house was a disaster. And I was like, I've got to get my house under control before I start actually writing about things that I want to write about. Right. So I was like, I'm going to get my house done and it'll be a way to practice writing. And so when I started, I thought, what is the smallest possible thing I could do? Because I was so sure I was going to fail. Because I had so many other times where I had started, I was going to change everything starting right now, And I decided I'm just going to try to keep my dishes done because the people I knew whose houses I could show up at did not have dishes covering their counters, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm just going to try to keep them done. And I just zeroed in on that. I said, I'm not going to worry about anything else. Like if I can get to other things, great, but I'm going to work on this. And I realized, I used to look at a few dishes in the sink and think, I don't know that it was conscious, but I would think, that's not worth my time. I'm a busy mom. I've got lots of stuff going on. I don't have time to stop and do the dishes, right?
Yes.
And then the next time it even registered that there were dishes in the sink, they were up over the top of the thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's going to take forever. I don't have the time to do that right now, right? Like I'm busy. I need to wait until I have the time to do that.
Right.
The next time it even registered that I needed to do the dishes, I was washing one fork in the 2 inches of water between the top of the dishes and the bottom of the faucet, right? Because I just didn't see it happening. But when I would have that, I call it dishes math now, right? Like, because I would always wait until every dish was dirty in my kitchen, it would take me 5 hours to clean the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And it had been 5 days. And so in my mind, because I'm like, hello, I can do math, right? I thought if it takes 5 hours to do dishes after 5 days, then obviously it takes an hour to do your dishes every day. I don't have an hour to spend on that. So I can't do them every day. Like that was my thought process.
Right. You can't track what you don't measure now.
Yes, exactly. So when I started doing them every day, going, I don't know how people do this, but I'm going to try to do it. Right.
Yes.
I realized one day's worth of dishes is like 15, 20 minutes. That's dishes.
Incremental.
Math. It does not work the way that math should work in my brain, right? Instead, it's like one day is manageable.
Yes.
One day is quick. 2 days, if I let it go 2 days, it doesn't just double the time. It goes from 15, 20 minutes to an hour.
Right.
3 days doesn't just double that. It goes like to 5 hours. And so, we're that mindset and that, but I had to experience it. Do you know what I mean? Like I teach
Absolutely.
this, I tell people, and some people are like, okay, got it. I'm going to try it. But a lot of my listeners and readers are like me. And they're like, it's probably different for me. Like that's what I always think. Right.
And it's like, that's okay. But
she probably doesn't know. And I'm always like, hey, give it a try. Just try it. Try it. Prove me wrong. And people will come back and say, I cannot believe the impact of doing the dishes every single day. Because the problem was every time I would go to clean my house, I would start in the kitchen because obviously that's where you have to start.
Exactly.
And then I would use up all my time and energy in the kitchen and I would never get to the rest of the house.
Right.
So it was almost this overthinking, over logicalizing, which is not a real word, but like
I make up words all the time.
Right. But like overthinking to the point of causing my own problems.
Yeah.
Because I had reasoned it out so far when in reality, actually just doing the thing experimentally gave me the information to realize. So it's not, it's one of my things. I have to do the dishes every day, but it's never become like, I always thought a habit was something that you did without realizing you were doing it. Instead, it's just a thing that I know has to be done every day. And I often have to verbally say out loud, because this is how I am. I have to say, I have to do the dishes because if I don't do them today, it's going to take me 3 times as long tomorrow.
Yes.
No, but that comes from that experience, right?
I am so interested in that math part of it that you were doing because I thought I was the only one that did that because I like measure and track everything that I'm doing. I'm like, well, if it takes me this long to do this, then I'll do
so
that.
Smart. Yes.
But it's like doing things incrementally.
Yeah.
That's such a good point because it's like you're rewiring your brain to say, I know I got to do these dishes every single day.
Yes.
It's more than just a habit. It's actually just rewiring the brain to say, I'm making it up in my mind.
Yeah.
To just do it every day or else it's going to pile up because X time, this many times, it's like I'm doing this thing and it's like, this is not working.
And I've learned it the hard way.
Yeah.
I've learned the hard way. So sometimes I think, why do I have to learn things the hard way? Like it would be so nice if I didn't have to learn it the hard way, but learning it the hard way is better than not learning it at all. Right.
Absolutely.
So,
a new way of thinking about doing a thing, because I used to think that getting rid of from my family, I couldn't get anything done until I emptied out my laundry basket all the way, getting all the laundry done. It wasn't until, to your point about the example of the dishes, I said, who says that I have to get down to the bottom of the laundry, that there has to be empty? As long as it's done weekly, a regular routinely, so where it won't get to the point to where it's out of control.
Exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
Yes.
And that sounds like faith over perfection.
Well, exactly. And I think I find that so interesting too, because I would not even start because I thought I'm not going to have time to finish it. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like 2 different sides of the same issue, which is perfectionism, which is, imposing rules upon ourselves that are actually not helpful and end up backfiring, you know?
Right. And that, like you say, imposing rules, because I always like to say there are no rules to decluttering. There are no rules to it because everyone is different. And there are so many rules of thumb out there. There's so many different types of philosophies. We've got minimalism, we've got maximalism. And it's just like there's no one way to do it. It's just like you say, it's just, okay, let's do it in steps. Let's think of this habit a little differently. And so what do you say about, like, when you were talking about I think you had mentioned your neighbors, like you wouldn't do the decluttering the same as your neighbors. Would you ever have people over to your house, like people who like to entertain? It's like,
That I would have over back when my house was a disaster.
yeah, like,
Yeah. I mean, so I always tell people, I'm like, I could have people over. I just needed 2 weeks to get ready.
wow.
Like, I mean, for real, you know, and now it's, please give me 15 minutes notice, you know.
Yes.
If you don't, I'll still let you in because first of all, I have decluttered so much that even when life is bananas, like right now, while I'm doing my promotion and stuff like that, you know, life is a little crazy right now.
Right.
So the house gets a little crazier, but there's so much less stuff that there's just not as much stuff to get out and be everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, and then it's easy to put away because there's actually places for things. But also, I have realized how important it is to show people, if somebody shows up at my door unexpectedly, there's a reason that they need to be there, right?
Absolutely.
And so even if I sometimes have to go, I can't believe my kitchen looks the way that it does, but come on in, you know, I don't know what they need to see right now.
Oh,
Like, I don't know how much they, for whatever reason, you know, that they need to know that I'm not perfect. I can't imagine anybody thinking I was perfect, but you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, they need to see reality. I needed to see reality.
Right.
Back when this was a struggle for me because I felt so alone in this.
And that is, and it's just like, I think, I don't know if I read on your website or in your book where where it's like connection. It's about connection. It's not so much about presentation.
Yeah.
Of when you're, when someone's in your home, that focus is just like,
Yeah, because we desperately need connection.
yeah. And when you say there's a reason that this person is here, and it's not so much to evaluate.
Right. And if they're evaluating it, that's on them, right?
Right.
But if I keep them out of fear of judgment, well, then that's on me, right? So that's
Yes.
the heart issue of it, is like, where is my heart in this? Where is my heart in wanting to serve the other person and show Jesus to them and, you know, help them feel loved and welcomed and accepted, even if it's at the expense of my own pride, you know?
And how would you recommend someone who is feeling overwhelmed right now with the chaos in their lives? Because I always believe in simplicity. What would you tell a person on how they can manage? What steps could they take? What small incremental steps could they take today? Like right now, as they're listening to this podcast, what could they start to implement right now and focus on?
So the two tasks that I found personally will get your home out of chaos and keep your house under control, right? So it'll get it under control and it'll keep it under control, is doing the dishes every day. Like, and if you think, oh, I do that, just double check and do them. Because sometimes I'll have people say, well, I thought I was doing the dishes every day. And then I made a point of it and I realized, oh, I had not been doing the dishes every day. So do the dishes every day and do a 5-minute pickup. Okay.
Yeah.
And that 5 minutes of picking up and putting away. Here's the thing. With most, I have like 4 daily habits that I, started with and that I teach people. With the first 3, which the 2 most important are the dishes and the 5-minute pickup. It's like with the ones like the dishes, the first day is the hardest. Like it's a catch up day, right? Like
Right.
you may be spending 5 hours, but the key is then to do the dishes again the next day, because that's when you learn, oh, 1 day's worth of dishes is actually not that big of a deal, right? Like, so it's so important to do that first day's catch up. With the 5-minute pickup, don't start by catching up, because that was always my struggle. Is I was like, what's the point of picking up when my house is a disaster? Like, what's the point of 5 minutes when there's just stuff everywhere with no place for it to go? Right?
Yes.
So, but with the 5-minute pickup, go ahead and do the 5-minute pickup. Like set the timer for 5 minutes, pick things up and put things away. If your house is a real disaster, spend that 5 minutes throwing away trash. You know, spend the 5 minutes with the things that you already know where they should go. Go ahead and do that. That's my 5-step decluttering process. But do like whatever you can for 5 minutes and then stop. And then if you want to do more, great. But don't do 5 minutes as a way to trick yourself into doing more.
Right.
Be like proud of that 5 minutes and view that as a successful task that you've completed. And 5 minutes every day, it is shocking, the power of that. And if you don't believe me, which I know a lot of people don't, right? Because I would always overthink, like, I don't think that would work that way in my house. I always say, take a picture. Take a picture, then set a timer for 5 minutes, and then take another picture and see the power. And do this in your living areas, the places where you actually spend time, so that you'll be experiencing the power of the work that you're doing. You'll be experiencing how much easier it is to live in a space that has been picked up. And that is the thing that will motivate you to keep going.
I love that, because you can see not only a picture in your mind, but it's easier to see a picture right then and there of the progress that you made. And it's like, oh, I actually did this. And then that thing becomes a thing that you do every day, whether
Right.
it's
It inspires you the next day to do it again, because you're like, that really did make an impact. Because sometimes if you don't take the picture, you're like, it still looks bad.
I love that.
Like, is this better? But when you can swipe back and forth between the two, that's when you see, oh, yeah, that was worth it. That was worth my time.
Yes. I love that. I love that. Oh my goodness. You have given us so many nuggets and actionable steps to actually get decluttered and get organized. And these are like simple steps to apply right away.
No complicated stuff for me. I can't do
I love it. I would take it and implement it today, because I'm like, the creativity, all of that, it's a thing, especially as a writer, because distractions come up, and then it's like you're looking at everything in the corners of the house before you finally get down to writing. And it's like, wait a minute, I need to do that, this, that, anything to keep from writing that first word. Well, Dana, oh my goodness, since you like to help people to clear out clutter, let me ask you this one question. What's the one thing that you refuse to declutter, no matter how impractical it is?
My mannequin.
Oh, mannequin. Okay.
When I was in college, I was working at a mall, and I can't even remember the name of the store anymore, but it was a men's clothing store, was going out of business, and they were selling their mannequins for like $20 a piece. And I was like, why would someone not want a mannequin? Like,
yeah,
my friends thought I was crazy, but they helped me carry him to the car. So I bought 2, because I'm never one to stop with one. I don't know what happened to the other one, but the one that I have, when I was a theater arts teacher before I had kids, I would dress it up in costumes in the classroom. And it's one of those things kind of early on when I was first decluttering, which I don't make arbitrary, like, you should never have this, you'll never use it, whatever. I'm like, listen, if I've got space, I can keep it, right? And it's just one of those things. From the very beginning, I wrote a post that was like, I'm keeping my mannequin. Like, I know there's no point in me having this, but I want it. And so it's kind of become that symbol of, I want my mannequin. I'm just going to always keep it. So
I love that. And that is the one thing that I'm like, it doesn't mean getting organized doesn't mean getting rid of
Yes,
everything. Keep
exactly.
the stuff that you love. And I love that because that's a part of creativity too. And you just said theater, you got a background in theater. I'm like, okay, that's creativity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Lots of theater teachers relate to my stuff.
Because I felt it was coming. I was like, wait a minute, there's got to be some acting, some theatrical, something in there for
Yeah.
that. But Dana, oh my gosh, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to wrap it up for our listeners. Get the book. Jesus doesn't care about your messy house. He cares about your heart. And listen to A Slob Comes Clean podcast. And Dana, where else can people find you on these internet streets?
If you just Google Dana K. White, you have to put the K in there because the UFC guy is named Dana White. So if you just Google Dana White, you're not going to find me. But if you put the K in there, you'll find me. So
You heard it. Not Dana White,
no,
UFC fighter. No,
not
not
me.
boxing.
No, is that who you thought you were going to interview today?
That's exactly who I thought. I said, "Oh yeah."
You were so disappointed. No, so yeah, if you Google Dana K. White or you just put that into wherever you like to buy books, my other books are all there. You'll find my website and that has all my YouTube and all that kind of stuff there. So
I love it. I love it. And Dana's got courses too, y'all. So I love to take a course, but yes. Thank you for listening to the Declutter Empress Radio podcast. My name is Derria. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend, a family member, or anyone who you think would benefit from listening to this podcast. Feel free to leave a rating or a comment. I would love to hear from you. I'll talk with you soon.